USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Game of the Week podcast from US College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. An in-depth look at this week's top college hockey matchup and a preview of the other big games.
Welcome to USCHO's Game of the Week podcast for Thursday, February 3rd, 2022. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. This podcast is brought to you by DCU, Digital Federal Credit Union. What will DCU mean to you? Find out today by visiting dcu.org. Membership required. One of the great matchups of the season is going to happen this weekend in Denver as number 7 St. Cloud State travels in to take on the Pioneers for a couple of epic NCHC battles.
And joining us now to talk about the game of the week is the head coach of Denver, and that's David Carle. And David, your team, talk about a team that's playing well of late, 14-1-1 all the way back to November 6th, an 8-game unbeaten streak. What do you like at this point about the way your team has been playing of late?
Yeah, I mean, I think the balance within our lineup, the continued growth of our young players has been fun to watch and to work with them, and really just the overall development of the team and our leadership group and how they're taking, more control and responsibility of the group. And, they show up ready to play, and, it's been a fun group to work with. I think they have something to prove, and they're coming together real nice as a group away from the rink and obviously at the rink as well.
You look nationally and you see a lot of guys from your team in the points lead, and Bobby Brink, Carter Savoy, Brett Stapley. And these are names that people, if they've followed college hockey for a couple of years, know. Is it nice to be able to depend on some of these, upperclassmen? I would say even, one of them is a sophomore, but I mean, in general, they have been around the game, and that has to be nice to be able to depend on players that can put the puck in the net.
Yeah, for sure. We definitely have, we're the second youngest team in the country, but we certainly have some veteran guys who have been around it for a little while. And, truth be told, we felt like an anomaly of a year last year, individually and collectively. And I think this season we're getting more of what we believe we really are. And some of those older guys, and Gutman, Stapley, Brink, Cam Wright's been a great addition. Ryan Barrow's having a career year. Just a lot of different guys contributing. And I think we came back with a bit of a chip on our shoulder and an edge to us. And it's really carried throughout here.
I'm glad you brought up last year because, you go into that bubble that was the NCHC for the first half of the year, and it probably was a disappointing result at the end. And it was a difficult bounce back from that. So you probably knew that you had to have like an NCHC tournament win to get into the NCAAs. Like it was a tough road ahead of you. Did that have a motivation factor? I mean, you said a chip on your shoulder, but I mean, what was the motivation factor in the locker room to start this season?
Yeah, I mean, I think it started as early as the spring quarter last year. Our program, we have really high standards for ourselves, and we could easily dissect a lot of different things that were out of our control that made it harder on us last year. We can have the argument about, that we should have been in the tournament. But at the end of the day, we weren't, and we have to take responsibility for that. And I think our guys did that starting in the spring. We had a great spring session of training and getting around each other again. Good summer session, got our freshmen in again, like we weren't able to do the year prior. And I think a lot of guys were embarrassed, like myself, that the year went the way it did. And again, a big chip on our shoulder to show that it's not who Denver hockey is. And I think we're doing that this year. And I give our guys a lot of credit. They've maintained a high level and a high standard throughout a large portion of the year. And it doesn't get any easier. It starts to get harder now. In February, it's where teams separate, and we play 3 really good opponents coming up here in the month of February.
You mentioned about being one of the youngest teams, the second youngest team in college hockey. If I counted correctly, 16 freshmen and sophomores on the roster, and these sophomores didn't really have kind of a regular season going into last year. There been any special challenges or anything that you approach as a coaching staff to really get those players integrated in and get them up to speed quickly when you have a young team like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just constantly teaching and showing video and conversations early in the year and trying to encourage older guys to go talk to younger guys and, placing them on lines with, guys who can kind of take them under their wing a little bit. And, ultimately then it's then preaching about, we can be a great team. We're going to go as far as we can grow. Really. I felt like this year's team is similar in that regard to our 2019 Frozen 14 that went to Buffalo. We had a real big freshman class, and we just felt like if we were a different team in February than we were in November and April than February, that we'd be able to close the gap on a lot of teams. And it's a similar mindset this year, and that's been expressed to our leadership group and our players. And then it's incumbent upon them to go out and do it and execute, take advantage of the opportunity and the resource. And I give our young players and our old players a lot of credit for kind of introducing them and pulling them along. And we've shown a lot of growth in our game, into February here.
The NCHC right from the start is really been arguably the best conference in Division I hockey. And you tend to have 4 teams that kind of rise to the top. Right now, you've got 6 teams vying for home ice in the playoffs. Is this the most competitive season you've seen in conference so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think to answer your question, and you look at the pairwise in the national picture, and I know that we had a year, I think it was 2015, we had 6 teams make the tournament. We'll see if the conference can accomplish that this year or not. 6 out of 8's a remarkable feat. I think 5's pretty secure right now. But yeah, no, it's as tight as it's ever been. We certainly could still finish 5th, and that's a reality. And one of the 5 of us who are kind of in that top 5 are going to have to play on the road, and it's what makes our conference so great. We play in meaningful games this time of year where other conferences just don't to the consistent level that we do. And I think it's resulted in a lot of the tournament success that our conference has had because come the national tournament, we're at a different level than a lot of other leagues. And I think you're going to see the same thing this year. I think you'll see a big time win percentage out of our conference in the first round of the tournament. The best news we say in the NCAA tournament is the first round, you don't have to play anyone in the NCHC. And so again, it's been a great year for the league and expect it to end well as well.
David, I have to ask about this because, pairwise, you're number 3 right now, but as a coach, how much do you actually look and kind of follow the pairwise at this point in the year? There's still, 7 weeks to go until Selection Sunday, but do you sit there and kind of follow this, or do you just have to kind of let things play out as a coach?
Well, I mean, I think as a fan, I definitely look at it. I like numbers. So in that regard, I find the pairwise to be a fascinating tool that we use. And ultimately, it's not something that we make. I would say it's something we make decisions on when we build out our schedule. And we've tried to figure out a way to maximize the pairwise within our scheduling. But once you get into the year, I mean, the numbers are the numbers, and there's a lot out of your control. What you can control is, your upcoming opponent and in your preparation. And that's what we do. So do we look at it 100%, but it doesn't lead to decisions or anything like that we make. But, I think this time of year is when it definitely is starting to get more accurate and indicative of, you're seeing less volatility, I guess, in the numbers after results. It's getting harder to move around. And that's pretty commonplace knowledge for everybody. So, it's a sprint right now, 10 games left for everyone outside of St. Cloud in our league. And that's our sole focus right now is the Huskies, a real good team that has really everybody back from their championship run last season.
Well, I'm sure 11:30 on Saturday night means a lot to everybody, not just coaches in this conference. Hey, let's look at the schedule ahead. You mentioned St. Cloud this weekend; they're number 7 in the poll. Minnesota Duluth next weekend, 6th in the poll. Western Michigan the next weekend after that, 5th in the poll. 18th in the poll is Nebraska Omaha. After that, I remember talking to Brett Larson at St. Cloud back. I think it was around December. And he said, boy, we have the murderer's row here. And you kind of have that now at this point in the season. I'm sure you know how difficult the next 8 to 10 games are ahead of you. But is it nice to have it at this point in the season where it kind of prepares you for the postseason? You know that every night you're going to be in a battle, and that kind of gets your mindset into battle mode?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's why, it's why we love this league. It's why players want to play in this league and come to programs like Denver and other institutions within our conference, because everybody goes through it at some point. I'm looking at Western schedule. They have St. Cloud, Denver, North Dakota, 3 straight weekends. You could go on every team's schedule within our league, and that's what you're going to see. Is an opportunity to see what you're made of, and you either sink and swim in this conference, and it's big challenges week in and week out. So it's something we're really excited about. Teams that are right around us in the standings and the pairwise, and again, a team that went to the championship game last year that we get to play and really measure ourselves up against.
Quickly, thoughts on St. Cloud. What do they bring to the table?
There are not many holes there. 5th-year goalie who's a rock for them. Great special teams, probably best combined on pace for ever, with a 38% power play and an 88% PK. So special teams are huge, and to me, they have a D-core that's been together for a number of years now. Same with the forward group, everybody back from last year's team dynamic off the rush in their ozone play as well. And just not a lot of holes. So it's going to be a real great challenge that we're looking forward to as a group.
Last question. You mentioned special teams and their great success, and they are one of the best special teams, clubs in the nation. Do you have to approach anything differently? You don't want to give St. Cloud power plays. That's pretty obvious, but you can't hold back in terms of your physical game. How do you change the approach if at all?
Yeah, I mean, not much. You just, again, you encourage discipline, keeping sticks on the ice, moving our feet, staying out of any, extracurriculars after the whistle. Pretty commonplace stuff that everyone would think about. And you just don't want to give them unneeded opportunity. I mean, you can't be reckless if you see numbers or a vulnerable player. You gotta, you can't take a 5, and you can't have a parade to the box. You can kill maybe 2 to 4. Hard to do that. 3 in a period's real hard. So it's just encouraging discipline, moving our feet, keeping our sticks on the ice. And I'm sure everyone's saying that this time of year, because the special teams battle becomes such a key component in getting the results that you're looking for this time of year.
Well, this is the battle of 2 of the best teams in the nation, both in the NCHC. Number 4, Denver, number 7, St. Cloud State. If you want to catch one of these games, 7 o'clock Mountain Time on CBS Sports Network on Friday, might be one of the best games you'll see on TV all year. David Carle, we appreciate your time. Always. It's a pleasure to talk to you. And hey, good luck the rest of the way.
Thanks, you guys. Appreciate you having me on. Thanks so much.
That's Denver's David Carle. More of the Game of the Week podcast coming up. This podcast is sponsored by DCU, Digital Federal Credit Union. Visit dcu.org.
This is the USCHO Game of the Week podcast from US College Hockey Online.
Know how people say life happens? Well, for me, life was happening, and I needed a new truck. I didn't have time to shop around for a good loan, so I got one from the dealer, higher interest and all. Month after month, those payments were squeezing me. So I went to DCU. They refinanced my loan and helped lower my rate, which lowered my payments. These days, I have more money in my pocket for whatever life throws at me. What will DCU mean to you? Insured by NCUA. Membership required. Visit dcu.org.
Welcome back to the Game of the Week podcast. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. And Jim, it was great talking to David Carle. And as he was talking about having the second youngest team and then talking about this older, experienced St. Cloud team, it made me think about how interesting the matchup is going to be. We talked back in the fall to Mel Pearson about having a young team at Michigan and about boy strength versus man strength. And you got to think about the kind of battles that might happen, especially when you're trying to encourage discipline and avoid giving up too many penalties and having to deal against the best special teams team in the country.
Well, I'll tell you, when I think about St. Cloud, I think about them as being one of the heaviest teams in the game. So if you're Denver, and this is a Denver team that is darn good, and we don't talk about them a lot, maybe because they're in the Mountain Time Zone, so we don't watch their games as much. But this is a very fast Denver team. This is a Denver team that can score. They have velocity. I mean, this is one of the best teams we've seen in David Carle's era. I know it's short, but I think that when you look at the speed and the velocity that they bring offensively, they will defend pretty well. And that's one of the things that, we heard David talk about a little bit, but they'll get back. And I think for St. Cloud, they're going to have to find a way to shut down some speed, but also find a way to penetrate. How do you get, through really good players? And then you have a great goaltender in Magnus Krona on the back end. I don't think we talked to Nowens about that with David Carle. And I think that this is one of the best heavyweight series that we will see this year in college hockey, not just the NCHC, but in college hockey.
I think it's also remarkable what David Carle has done there. Now, Denver has a great tradition going way back, but when you think in the past 2 decades with Guaz and Montgomery and now David Carle, this is a team that has had minor dips, but always comes back and seems to just keep moving along. This may be a team that you can compare with some of the best Denver teams along the way. I mean, some of their story is yet to be written, but at the top of the NCHC as they are right now, and 14-1-1 in their last 16, this is a pretty remarkable team.
I think certainly you're right there, Ed. And, you think of George Gwozdecki and what he did in the WCHA days and, won championships, but obviously the 2 biggest seasons for them, 2004, 2005, winning national titles, those stand out. And Jimmy Montgomery, what he did in bringing a national title to that program meant a lot. But I think that what we see David Carle do, I don't want to say he was being thrown into a program, and it wasn't like that was a program that didn't have some of the blocks already in place to how to build a great wall. But I mean, this is a team that you don't know where it can go year to year. And last year was a tough start. And you heard him talk about, how difficult things were early in the season. And when you don't start out well, you never know where your confidence is going. And confidence is such a big part of college hockey. I think that they have started to rebound on that. I mean, listen, I think getting shut out of the NCAA tournament last year, despite the fact that they felt they were a pretty darn good team, it was a subjective year. Where they would have been in the pairwise had the pairwise been used, we don't know. But I think that it motivated them. And I like the motivation factor. They have played some of the best hockey. And I know that we've talked so much this year about Minnesota State, Quinnipiac, and Michigan. But the reality is Denver, kind of ranks right up there with one of the best teams in the nation.
Well, let's look at some of the other matchups this weekend. Penn State comes in for a pair at number 13 Notre Dame. Notre Dame swept Penn State the first weekend of January, and they're coming off a split at home with Minnesota. You got to think Notre Dame is a heavy favorite here, but Penn State has that explosive offense, and they are no easy matchup.
Well, and what's your motivation if you're Penn State? You know where you are in the pairwise. You're not in a good position right now, but you want to get into a better position. And how do you do that? You have to win the games against teams that are below you. Above you. And I think that that there's a huge motivation right now, I think, for Penn State. So Notre Dame, you know who you are as a team. You're a team that chases the game, not the best. You know that you have to play from ahead. By the way, I do feel like Notre Dame has proved us wrong over the last few weeks. They can fall behind. They can still win some games. They've done that of recent. But I do believe that you have to go out there and you have to be able to beat this Penn State team. This is the team, I look at every year in the standings, and you have to find a way. If you're considering yourself a top 3 team in any league, you have to be able to beat the bottom teams. In the Big Ten, there's not many bottom teams because you only have 7 teams. So Penn State right now technically factors into one of the bottom teams. If you're thinking Michigan, Minnesota, they're above you, and maybe there's some teams below you. You have to find a way to beat Penn State. This is a big weekend for Notre Dame to prove themselves.
Next on the list is number 18 Omaha at number 12 North Dakota. It's been a rough little stretch for both teams in a way. A split last weekend at Colorado College for the Mavericks, and a split the weekend before that at Minnesota Duluth. That's not tough, I guess, because Duluth's a pretty good team. They were swept at Denver. Before that was Omaha. Meanwhile, North Dakota got a win and a tie, a shootout point against St. Cloud State. So they picked up 5 of 6 points at home after losing 4 straight. These are 2 teams that really need these games this weekend. And, with that turnaround for North Dakota, it seems like going into the Lions' den for Omaha.
Well, I don't know that there's a bigger pairwise series, Ed. You're looking at Omaha right now. They're tied for 18th, technically 19th. You're looking at North Dakota, they're 13th. These 2 teams, they're, very much bubble teams. North Dakota are in a lot better position. But, when you think of a pairwise series, and if you're Omaha, you're thinking if we have a chance of making the NCAA tournament, it has to happen this weekend. We need 5 of 6. We need really... When you look at the measurement of the 55-45, if you're getting into overtime and shootout and all that stuff, you need all 6 points. You need 2 regulation wins. And if you don't come out with those, I'm not sure that Omaha is in a great position. Even if you come out with a regulation win and then a tie and a shootout win, you get 5 or 6 points in your division, but that doesn't mean much when you really go to the end of it and say, what did that mean to our pairwise? It didn't mean a lot. So I think this is one of the biggest pairwise series we're going to see all year.
And it's funny that a pairwise overtime loss at North Dakota would be more helpful for Omaha than a pairwise overtime win for North Dakota. And that's just the way the numbers work out. That should be a fun series to watch. And then the in-season tournament, that is the in-season tournament of in-season tournaments, the 69th Beanpot happens Monday at TD Garden. This is a weird one. You've got a number 19 and a number 18 in the poll in this, but it's a bunch of teams that are probably performing below where they want to be performing. Harvard, talented team, but not ranked right now. Boston College, disappointing season. BU without Drew Comesso, Northeastern without Devin Levi. This seems like it's totally up for grabs this coming Monday.
I think that's the best way to put it. It's kind of a crapshoot. You're talking about BC is going to be missing 3 players. Harvard's going to be missing 2. Northeastern and BU both missing their goaltenders. I mean, this is one of those tournaments. It feels like 1980 all over again, where you didn't know what 4 teams were going on the ice because so many guys were playing for the Olympics. And that's where we are. And the reality is the 4 coaches will coach as much as they want, but it comes down to this is a tournament, and I grew up in Boston, so maybe it feels a little different for me, but this is not just the GLI, or this is not the, Connecticut tournament. It's not one of those tournaments. This is the Beanpot means for a school like, let's say Northeastern, which has now won, I think, 3 or 4 straight Beanpots. But they didn't win it for like 27 years or something like that. Like, it means the world to win this tournament to these schools. Harvard hasn't won it since 1989. That was the first tournament I ever got to attend in person. As I was, I guess I was about 15, 16 years old. And it's one of those events that if you don't know and you haven't seen it, you don't understand the emotion. So I would say that all 4 of these teams missing huge parts of their lineup, whether it's your goaltender or whether it's like 2 or 3 of your best players, you're missing massive parts of your lineup. So it is now on emotion, and the emotion should carry these players. Coaches can talk a lot about this, but it's never the coaches, it's the alumni, it's the people that have been around this program for decades that understand the value of the Beanpot and how much winning a Beanpot means to a school. There's no way. I mean, I think it's the tournament that is tried to be duplicated the most times. Whether it was the state schools of New England that tried to do it, it's the Connecticut Ice Tournament. I even say the GLI tried to be the Beanpot. I'm sure one existed somewhere around the same time as one another. The Minnesota tournament that tried to do the same thing. You try to make it the Beanpot, but the reality is the Beanpot is special because it's played on 2 Monday nights, separate weeks. The entire crowd is business people. And that's what people don't understand, is that it is the biggest business night in Boston that you could ever have on 2 back-to-back February Mondays. These are people that are dining and wining clients and enjoying themselves. The hockey is superfluous, but to the alumni base, it means so much. So that's a long way of talking about the Beanpot, in my opinion, but I don't worry about missing players. I think the emotions of the day will win this championship.
And it's an opportunity for some players who don't see as much ice time or maybe don't play on a top line to prove something and show what they have. No player on any of these 4 teams is a bad player. These are all very good players. And sometimes you just don't get into the lineup. Maybe you're a freshman or a sophomore and you've got some upperclassmen ahead of you. This is your chance to shine. This is your chance to be the next man up.
I mean, there's no doubt about that. Both goaltenders at BU and Northeastern will see that. And you're going to see some guys, jump into the lineup that, maybe always wanted to play in a Beanpot, or maybe they didn't even know what the Beanpot was, but they're being told very quickly, hey, you're in the lineup on Beanpot night. It's special. And I think that means a lot to these players.
Well, it's some great hockey ahead this weekend. It's that time of year where every weekend means a whole lot. This podcast has been brought to you by DCU Digital Federal Credit Union. What will DCU mean to you? Find out today by visiting dcu.org. Membership required. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Game of the Week podcast, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.